Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Fisher on behalf of the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive and Cascade Rail Foundation. Welcome to today's program on November 26th, 2025. This will be our last regularly scheduled program for this season. However, we're already looking at a really great 2026 season, and let me just tempt you. I know, there's temptation lurking tomorrow on Thanksgiving, but let me give you a taste of some of the events that we'll be looking at in the new year. January 7th, Dale Sanders will be with us. He'll be reprising the program that he's done for the Center for Railroad Photography and Art in Madison, Wisconsin, on the behind the scenes look at his photography associated with that landmark book on the British Columbia Railway. It's just quite a great book. And this is the behind the scenes stuff of all the things that he put up with to do that. Don't look for that book on eBay. It was more than my mortgage payment last time I looked. January 21st, speaking for the Center of Railroad Photography and Art, we're going to have Jay Bondurant Bon French with us, and he will be looking at color photography from the Jim Neubauer collection. That's going to be vintage Midwestern photography in the 1950s. Speaking of that, the following week, February 4th, we're going to have George Ferrero, who is the vice president of the Lake States Archive in beautiful Baraboo, Michigan, my ancestral hometown. And he will be doing a color program on the Duluth, South Shore, and Atlantic. It's a very rare collection, a very neat program. So that's just a couple of the things that we've got coming for the new year. Actually, the calendar is full all the way out to June 10th. And on June 10th, I'm just going to jump ahead to the end. Margaret Weatherby will be back with, where's Tug Dog? Mad Dog. Mad Dog. What's his name? Ed Nolan? Your neighbor? Yeah, he's not there. It's Ed Nolan, head archivist for Washington State Historical Society, along with Margaret Weatherby will be with us. And this will be kind of like, I would think, kind of like Jeopardy, because you're going to be looking at some images and be expected to figure it out. I know Daniel and Alan had some fun playing Jeopardy the last time with her, and she really liked that experience. And so I think that encouraged them to come back. So that's about it I've got for all the news and notes for our program for this week. What I'm going to ask people to do, except maybe for Dave, George, and Alan, Ed, of course, and John, Jack, people that were railroaders, if we could all turn our cameras off, and I need to keep my audio on, but we're having a little bit of bandwidth problem here at my, oops, what I wanted to do is do that, not the other. We're having a little bit of audio trouble at my house today, and so I kind of want to make sure that we save as much bandwidth as possible for our guests. And this is one of those programs that your host and moderator is actually having to run, which I normally don't do. I normally just turn it over to the presenters and let them deal with this thing. And so when I actually have to do it, it's a little bit more work for me. Let me try that. I'm going to try this one more time. I appreciate everybody being patient with me. So Dave, do you have a full-size picture of Cameron Galbraith now?
No.
Still a thumbnail. Okay, hang on, guys. This is why you don't have your host do this kind of stuff. And I'm much better at having other people do it. So give me a second. Okay. Okay, I've done that. Now let me come back over here. I appreciate everybody being patient with me. And now, Dave, how am I doing now? Can anybody see this?
Oh, that couldn't be better, Jonathan.
There you go. Well, Dave Sprau is here with us today, folks. And Dave, tell us who this is, where this is, and what's going on.
Well, that's Cameron Galbraith, and he's sitting in the double track South dispatcher's chair in the office in Tacoma before it was remodeled. So I would guess that that year would probably be about 1961, 62. And he just, Jim Fredrickson went around and took everybody's picture. So I think he stopped what he's doing and put his best face forward and got his picture taken.
What's this thing hanging around his neck?
Well, that's just a speaker. In movies, you'll see where telephone operators are wearing those things. That freed up our hands so that wherever we went, whatever we said could be picked up without us having to use a handset or to wear a headset or any kind of earphones because the incoming sound came on a loudspeaker.
Oh,
And
so did you have like a foot pedal or something that would turn this on or what?
yeah, I step on the foot pedal and talk.
Okay. And it looks like he's got a train sheet in front of him.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, we can't. And and off in the right-hand corner, is that a remnant of Morse code?
Well, it isn't a remnant. He actually would use that on the branch lines. In those days, we didn't have telephone to all the branch lines. That was the that was the local sounder for whatever circuit you wanted to plug yourself into and work on. And you see it's shaped kind of triangular. That made the sound that came out of it nice and loud so you could hear it good.
And and you could do what, 15, 20 words a minute in Morse?
Oh, I could do probably 25 or 30, but the normal speed for sending and receiving was around 20.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's see what else we've got here. These are not in any particular order, folks, so it's always going to be sort of a pop quiz when the next one pops up.
John Hokinson, or that's how he pronounced it. It was, if you pronounced it phonetically, it was Hackinson. He was a trained dispatcher. He remained through the Burlington Northern years and quit the BN in 1973. Went to work for Georgia Pacific at Bellingham pushing a broom, and then worked himself way the hell up with Georgia Pacific.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Mr. Hokuson is the company that he keeps, right? Because his best friend growing up in Anacortes was none other than our dearly loved founder of PNRA, Gary Tarbox.
Yeah,
So
they were traveling buddies.
yeah, they were, and so Gary's first trip to Seattle, where they photographed steam at the Hanford Street Roundhouse, John Hokuson was the one that drove the car. So is this in the remodeled depot now, Dave? It looks like they have wood paneling.
It's a little hard to tell, uh, but looking at those windows, I think it was the remodeled office.
So that would put it more into like the 70s era?
After 1967, but I can't say how soon after. And it could be the old office. It's a little hard for me to tell by your picture whether that stuff on the wall is the old pegboard or whether it's the newer acoustic board that they put up to replace it. I tend to think that's a newer after 1967 picture.
Okay. Well, let's move on and folks in the audience, if you knew any of these people or you had any positive experiences you wanted to recount, this isn't just me and Dave talking. You're welcome to unmute and chime in. So, Jack, if you knew some of these people, and I know Alan and George have bumped into some of these folks, as we'll see. So let's see what we get when we move to our next image. Here's one of our favorite people, Dave.
That's my fearless leader from about I don't know, in the mid 80s, Ken Iverson, back when he was a train dispatcher in Tacoma.
And he's working on a train sheet there. And yeah, it's just, Ken's one of our dear friends. And you think Fredrickson took this picture as well?
I don't think so. I think this was after Fredrickson's time. Anything is possible, but Fredrickson was gone from the railroad by this time. I think Ken is working on Centralia North, but it's a little hard to tell. can't read what the sheet actually says.
Yeah, Dave, that definitely is Centralia North, and I think Jim took those pictures. I started dispatching in 1971, and I don't think Jim was promoted until 73, 74, something like that. And
Oh no, no, he was promoted right away in 1970 because I remember the Great Northern guys that I was working with in Seattle didn't like very much that idea of that office upstairs that Jim was in. However, thank you for coming in and stating that Jim took it. He was still active, with his camera. He went around and took as many pictures as he.
Dave, I hate to correct you, but Jim Frederickson was the assistant chief dispatcher on duty my first night, which would have been October 1971. So he wasn't promoted right away at the merger time. It was a little bit later.
Okay, I stand corrected, but it was quite early because I can remember that the Great Northern guys in Seattle didn't like the idea of that office being established upstairs, and I kind of had to come to Jim's rescue. They were mad about an exempt position taking over some of our chief work, and I tried to mitigate it a little bit and explain to them, he's a pretty good guy. He won't actually try to cut our throats, and he didn't. But that was my recall of how it was early. But,
I might also mention the hairline there kind of dates me in my earlier days.
well, it looks like you look like that now, Ken.
Handsome and radiant as ever, Ken. You know that. So, Ken, where were you sitting with this? Do you have any idea what you were working on?
Yeah, that Dave was right. That's the Double Track North booth, and it's pretty unique. And I know wouldn't have been the mountain territory because that doesn't look like the mountain train sheet, but definitely the Double Track North.
Okay.
As you walked back into the trick rooms, that was the first office on the right. The mountain was the second office on the right, and the Double Track South was the first office on the left.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
When did Earl Johnson hire out there?
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I could run and get a seniority list, but I think it was around 73.
Okay, the reason I ask is, was he on Double Track North or Double Track South?
He worked everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we first started, we were on the extra board, and so that put us everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing too was that after I left the service and I was trying to find a railroad job in the summer of 75, I went actually down to the depot into the dispatcher's office. And the first guy I talked to, I didn't know it at the time, was Earl Johnson. And he said the only thing that he knew they had available for employment was a section gang up on the Cascade, probably up on the Stampede there.
Well, I mean that turned around. So, well, Ken, I'm really glad that you were here to see this picture because it's just a classic shot and brings back memories from days gone by, doesn't it?
Good old days for sure. And an aside about Earl, he actually transferred from the relay office, I believe, in St. Paul. So he came out as an experienced telegrapher, and didn't take him long to break in as a train dispatcher. And we all just adored Earl. He was a true gentleman, just a nice guy, and a pretty good train dispatcher too.
Yeah, I have some other stories
I
about
like
him
to hear.
as we go along, but
I just talked to him the other day. I just talked to Earl the other day.
all right.
Still around. He's a sharp cookie. I can remember one of the places he worked when he first came out here. He was the operator at Interbay. And you'd think he'd been there for 200 years when he came, very first came on the phone. Ken, I'm glad you're here. And if I'd have known you were here, I'd have shut up and just let you illustrate this photograph. I do the best I can with what limited brain cells I have left. So
Cooperate and graduate, folks. That's always been my motto. Here's a picture. I don't know why this one didn't come out so good, but this is Jim Frederickson, don't we think?
yes, that's him working upstairs in the King Street station at the original mini control center that had the Great Northern guys in Seattle so upset.
This is what you
The
were
original,
just alluding to moments ago.
yeah, the original of that is blurry. That's why this is blurry.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got the rotary phone and the vintage water heaters. I remember those as a kid. They would gurgle at night, and you'd always wonder what was going on. So we'll get another picture of Jim here in a minute. Who's
Clifford,
this?
that's Clifford W. Johnson, and he retired from. He didn't retire. He died while he was employed by the Southern Pacific as a dispatcher in their office in Los Angeles in about 19. No, let's see, about 1982 or 83. But in this picture, he's working the mountain dispatcher's job in Tacoma. He was one of my mentors. He could be a little particular, let's put it that way. But he was very good on train orders and rules and things like that. He also had been one of the people that had been loaned to the White Pass in Yukon and had worked up there as a train dispatcher.
Oh, wow. So that's where he's the one that kind of inspired you to be kind of finicky about your stuff too?
Well, I don't think I needed any help from him, but yeah, I mean, he taught me one of the things that I kind of learned from him and a few others was it's okay to be sharp with people if they're doing a poor job and not giving you the information that you need in order to do your job.
Well, there you go. And what's this thing by the side of his head? Is that the speaker?
Yeah, that's the loudspeaker.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, clicking along here, folks.
Richard D. Leary, that was Dick Leary. And when most of the time, well, I shouldn't say this, I should start over. When I first knew Dick, he was a trick dispatcher in Tacoma, and I was just a lowly operator. And then we went up through the years, and he finally wound up being the assistant chief dispatcher in Seattle, handling the relief of dispatchers. And everybody loved him because he was just so accommodating. If you needed something, if you needed a day off or some other favor that he could give you, he saw to it that you got it. And he was just a really good guy. Everybody liked Dick. And he was a very competent train dispatcher too, I might add.
That was my next question. I was just going to ask you that. Ken, did you ever run into him?
Oh, absolutely. And what Dave is describing when Dick was handling the train dispatcher layoffs and vacations and things, that's when I was the chief dispatcher up there in Seattle.
Oh,
And believe me, it was a gift from the goddess that we had Dick doing that work. And by the way, Dick had one incredible sense of humor. You were always laughing when you were around him. He just had an incredible way of making light of things and taking the seriousness out of it and making it a lot of fun.
He had
go ahead,
Irish,
Dave.
he had an Irishman's way of telling stories and laughing at them and getting everybody else in the room laughing. And I should add at this time, yeah, Ken was the chief. He was the big boss. And I got to put in a word for Ken here. I called him our fearless leader, and he was. But the poor guy, we had a superintendent of transportation who was just a micromanager, and he hounded everybody, including Ken, to death. And I think Ken would have been a 10 times more memorable chief than he was, and he was pretty darn good. But I think he'd have been even better if that guy would have just left him alone, because Ken knew the right way to run that office. And
Oh, yeah. So
that's all I got to say. But
Ed Berntsen, are you in the audience still? Ed, did you remember Dick Leary at all?
So yeah, he was one of the dispatchers in Tacoma in the 1963 who broke me in as a dispatcher, April to August of 63, before I got my first day on the job as a dispatcher. Very personable, good to work with. I really was delighted to be able to get along well with all the dispatchers. Some were a little more gruff, others were a little more cheerful, and Dick Leary was definitely on the cheerful side.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really glad that that some of you former dispatchers are here today so that we could talk about these people and just kind of, kind of memorialize them, for today's audience. So I appreciate that a great deal. All right, Dave, who's this?
That's Clayton McLean. His full name was Charles Clayton McLean. I got my seniority date thanks to him laying off, but it wasn't a very happy occasion for him because he had to lay off to take his wife to the hospital, and she later became seriously ill. And anyway, he was a great guy. He was a stickler for the rules, and very appropriately, he wound up being the head of the rules department for Burlington Northern many years later. The Saunders family, the engineer, Bill Saunders and Bud Saunders, they are his stepfather and his uncle. It's a really weird story about life in Leicester, but anyway.
Oh, he's from Leicester, you think, eh? Okay.
Oh, he's from Leicester.
Oh, okay. Now, why is it, if he's an MP dispatcher, that they have a Milwaukee Road calendar on their wall?
Oh, in those days, we didn't stand on ceremony and nobody cared. The Milwaukee provided us a nice calendar with 3 months at a time in nice big letters that we could see. And we hang their calendar on our wall. Nobody cared in those days. Everybody got along good.
Ed, do you remember this fellow, Ed Berntsen?
Do I remember what?
Do you remember this person, Mr. McLean?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I agree with everything Dave said. He was a stickler for detail but a very capable dispatcher. In the early 60s when I got my dispatching date, he owned first trick day job on the double track north. But all of this group of dispatchers, the Jim Frederickson, Clayton McLean, Dick Leary, Dick Noble, a lot of them were kind of like the World War II crew. They had been teenagers in World War II, and by the time Dave and I started in 1960 as telegraphers, they were seasoned railroaders, and a year or 2 or 3 later, they were breaking us in as dispatchers, following in their shoes. So really, we had a very fortunate timing in life that Dave and I both got hired basically because there was a shortage of telegraphers in 1959, to the extent that none of the telegraphers in the Tacoma Division, lines west of Yakima, were able to get a day off. Of what we were told, there were just no relief telegraphers available to cover all the must-fill positions, train order control positions all over the division. So that's when Northern Pacific created in April 1960, a telegraph school in conjunction with Clover Park Vocational Technical School at Lakeview, now known as Lakewood, and Washington, just south of Tacoma. And Chuck Stillman, the chief dispatcher, Jim Frederickson, many of the dispatchers and telegraphers like Pearl Jacobson out of the division relay office, WR telegraph office in the Union Station, Tacoma. They were all variously served as instructors in telegraphy and instructors in train dispatching, or train order operation, I should say, and what an operator is supposed to do on each of the shifts. And then got into things like station accounting and how you properly handle waybills and collect cash for freight charges and things, as well as sell tickets. So that was the course that many of us high school and college kids were able to go through there for the summer of 1960 and again in summer 61 and 62, I think, which gave the Northern Pacific a crew of weekend warrior telegraphers who ended up, many of them working, including me, working quite a few years for the Northern Pacific and on into the Burlington Northern.
All right, moving on to our next image. Tom Melvin.
Yeah, that's E.T. Melvin, Earl T. Melvin, better known as Tom. He had been an operator at Stampede and Martin, and later was an operator at Auburn Yard, and then came into the dispatcher's office. He was right ahead of John Hawkinson on the seniority list. Unfortunately, for him, unfortunately for me, he died one weekend, and that's what gave me a regular job as a train dispatcher in 1968.
Oh, well, we rest in peace, Mr. Melvin. Yeah. So, um,
The poor guy, he had been in World War II, and he'd been over in the Philippines or someplace, and he picked up one of those horrible diseases that you get during the war. And before we go on to this next smiling gentleman, I should mention that Clayton McLean, uh, who we just looked at previously, he was a dispatcher in a railroad operating battalion in World War II. And he used to tell me about how the European railroads were all double track, and all those Europeans could not understand anything about single track operation. And when all these bridges and tunnels and terminals and things got bombed in Europe, the American railroad operating battalions would simply turn it into single track using what track was left and operate it with train order rules. And he said these European railroaders were just astounded at the whole theory that could be done without double track. In other words, a track for each direction.
track for each direction, right? So, he got something during the war, maybe, and that's kind of.
Yeah, he did. He told me about it, and he was not a healthy person. His health was poor. And one weekend, his ankles all swelled up, and he said to me, "Look at this. What do you suppose is the matter?" And I said, "I don't know," but I said, "I think you better go to the doctor." Well, about 3 days later, he was dead.
Oh man. Well, rest in peace, Mr. Melvin, and thank you for your service to our country during World War II. Now we're moving on.
That's Dick Noble. Dick had been the chief dispatcher on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad during World War II. Dick had lost his seniority on the NP by going up there and had to come back and start over. He used to be ahead of Clayton McLean in seniority, and when he came back, he had to hire out to be behind him. And Dick said to me, "That never hurt me." He says it was an experience that was well worth it. Now, his dad was a rather notable person. I think I ought to defer to Alan Miller and let Alan tell about the rest of this.
Alan.
Yeah. Well, his dad was a conductor on the Milwaukee Road in early years when the Civic Extension was just getting started. And there was a guy named Maxwell Swan that worked as a brakeman during those years, and he wrote his experiences down, and they were published in the Railroad Magazine in 1945. And he talks about working for Conductor Noble out of Kittitas, and he was a conductor on a work train. And I think they were filling in some bridges or something out there. Anyway, he had to hold trains there at Kittitas for Conductor Noble, and he was holding the Olympian, and this old head crew on the passenger train was trying to break him down and let them go. He says, there's no way that Noble would hold up the Olympian like this. You got your instructions wrong. And he held his ground, and finally Noble came flying in there. And the reason he was late is they were dumping some fill and he derailed some cars or something like that, and they had to get him back on the rails before they could come back to Kittitas. But he claimed that was the only good thing he ever did for Noble. I guess later on he coupled into a car on a grade, and the car got away from him, and they had to chase it down the grade. And they were on the passenger train's time, but they got the car coupled and got it out of the way. But he said he left Noble's crew after that. But anyway, that was his father was that Milwaukee Road conductor.
And Dick here, the guy in the picture, he was an NP dispatcher, of course, but he, like a dispatcher should, we all got everybody's train got good handling, or at least I'd like to think they did. Dick was particularly partial to the Milwaukee. If he was working a district where there was a Milwaukee train, he saw to it that they got an even break. And I think that was out of deference to the crews on the railroad that his father had been employed on, and that he had grown up with himself as a little kid.
I was going to ask you about that, so thanks for mentioning that, Dave. What are we seeing when we look out the window in this picture?
Oh, that's the old coach yard at the Union Station in Tacoma. I can't tell exactly what we're seeing, but that's what was outside of that window.
Okay.
They had all kinds of stuff in there besides coaches. They had old outfit cars and everything in there.
Yeah, once they weren't really using it to make up passenger trains in Tacoma anymore, which was kind of after the train to oh, I don't know, would have been some of the trains going south out of Tacoma in the earlier years. Once it wasn't really a coach yard anymore, they just used it for everything. And there were stripe outs and bad ordered cars and carloads of rock and air dumps with gravel ready to go if we had a need for ballast or gravel at a derailment. They just use it for everything.
So now this was your last day of your career, Dave, but what happened?
Well, it was supposed to be the last day that I worked on the NP before I went to work as a fireman on the Great Northern. In July of 1969, and Jim Fredrickson wanted to commemorate it, so he brought his camera down and set it up with a timer and jumped into the picture and got in there. So that was myself and the crew that I worked with on what was supposed to be my last day, but it turned out it wasn't my last day. I forget exactly what the glitch was, but I worked for one more week. I think it was in order to give a proper 90-day notice or 30-day notice, whatever the hell was required, that you were resigning. And the guy on the left is Paul Thompson. And then I'm the wimpy looking guy in the middle with the necktie, which I always wore. I was always.
How old were you in this picture?
How old was I? 25. And on my right is Arnold McFarland. Now I trained both Paul and Arnold on how to work that third trick double track north job. And then of course Jim Fredrickson, the night chief. So that was myself and the two other guys I was working with in the night chief on what was supposed to be the last night that I worked.
Ed, do you remember any of the people in this picture? Ed Berntsen?
I don't. I didn't work as much with Paul Thompson, but the other three I know pretty well.
What about McFarland? Any thoughts, any memories of him?
A.J. McFarland, yes, he worked a lot on the mountain as a telegrapher and then became a dispatcher. And he, excuse me, when I learned in December of '68, when I was working the day job on Double Track South at a very busy time when we were cutting in the CTC for the first time from Vancouver, Washington, north to Kalama, every day, the third trick dispatcher, which I happened to own that job, uh, was having to put out a bunch of orders taking one main track out of service between Kelso and or Longview Junction and Vancouver or other segments so that they could install the signals and do testing and things before they allowed trains back on the track as being to be governed by a signal indication instead of train orders, or in addition to train orders to begin with. And so when the day job, so during the day, it was really a zoo of activity with, I think we counted something like 65 trains a day in a 24-hour period between Longview and Junction and Vancouver with the UP, NP, and GN passenger and freight trains, and then the Milwaukee trains, Longview Junction north to Chehalis Junction. The double track south was a very busy job, and then you take one of the main tracks out of service, and you have the excitement of having a southbound NP 408 passenger train due Kelso at 3:08 p.m. and northbound GN 459 passenger train due at Kelso at 2:29 p.m. And all the freight trains had to duck in the clear on their own some way to get out of the way of those passenger trains, tying up both of the main tracks with one main track out of service. It was kind of busy. The the I ended up marking up on the day job in December '68 and had an interesting time there. And I got a call about the third week on the job late December, got a call from Alan Johnson, a former Northern Pacific dispatcher who was the Assistant General Superintendent of Transportation in King Street Station, Seattle. Eddie, you want to come to work for me? Sure. Hung up the phone. He called back and he says, you hung up? I said, well, I got to give a transfer to the next operator, dispatcher. Anyway, I ended up going to work for the Northern Pacific in January 16, 1969 as my first exempt job as a traveling car service agent in the transportation department. But to relieve me, A.J. McFarland began breaking in on the double track south job. And he was at it for, I think, a week or so, handling it well on, I think I was back on third trick by then. And I was able to take my 2 weeks vacation, January 1 to 15 of 1969, and then I became exempt supervisor for the rest of the year. And he said about the fourth or fifth morning, he says, well, Ed, I said, I think if I spent about another week at this, I think I got a handle on it. Well, you probably better compress that a little bit. I just put a note in the chief dispatcher's box that you're qualified on this job, so you better learn it pretty quick. So he took a gulp and took the job and did well.
Excellent. All right, moving along.
Hey, he was related to all of the other McFarlands, especially all the Great Northern McFarlands. If you knew anybody on the GN named McFarland, he's related to them. And he originally had been a GN guy. He was the agent at Merritt. And he saw where he was going to get bumped out of there and wind up on the extra board. And he discovered that by quitting the NP or quitting and going over to the NP, he could be the day operator at Stampede. So the following week, he went to work for the NP and got the first trick job at Stampede. He really, lucked out all the time. When he became a dispatcher, he was an extra dispatcher for about a week and bid in a regular job like Ed told about. And his brother, who had been a dispatcher on the GN for almost 20 years and was still on the extra board, said, how in the world does this happen? I've been on the extra board for 20 years and you get a regular job in 1 week. But that's the way it kind of worked. And I'm like Arnold. I came from the Great Northern. I didn't go to that telegraph school in Tacoma that Ed tells about, even though I probably should have and learned station work a little better. But I came from the Great Northern with a letter of recommendation from their chief dispatcher.
That's right. We've talked about that in some of the interviews that we've done with you, Dave, that are on our YouTube channel. Now, folks, as we move on, I just want you to notice how nice and neat Dave looks. And we can see Dave evolve over the years in some of these coming photos, folks. So who do we have here?
Well, we have somebody that ought to be telling about this on here.
Okay, give me a hint. Well, Jack Christensen, you remember the 1997 run of the 4449 over Stevens Pass, I know, right? Maybe Jack's not here.
Yeah, he's on.
He was on.
He was on, I know, but he could be.
Jack, check your audio.
The man on the left is Roger Campbell, no relation to my grandfather, Delbert Campbell, clerk at Auburn. Obviously, Jack on the right.
Jack. I don't know who Jack is, Michael.
Christensen.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, okay. That's Jack.
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't. Jack, is that you?
Yeah. It was muted for a while.
Ah.
You can hear me now, huh?
Oh, we can hear you
Yes.
loud and clear, Jack. Yeah. So
Yeah.
is this an NP convention that you're at?
And I don't know what that picture comes from. I can't recall which year this was.
Probably after 97, just guessing from the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Dave, you got any recollections of when we got these pictures?
Well, I think that is, yeah, you're right. It's after but that run you were talking about wasn't over Stevens. It was over Stampede. And like the t-shirt says. And I think this was at Auburn at one of the BN Vets meetings, because I see image of John Phillips in the background there.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
yeah.
Okay.
JP the third?
Yeah,
Yeah. There
we
you
used
go.
to be on
Is
then.
he still with us?
Oh, he's around somewhere, but I don't know where.
Or his alter ego?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We used to meet once a month and drink coffee and tell stories, sort of like what we're doing now.
well, Jack, you're handsome and radiant as ever in this photograph. So I apologize for not recognizing you sooner. Mainly because I'm looking you in the face, not at your profile. So that's my only excuse. Okay, Dave, who do we got here?
That's Frank Ryan. He was another train dispatcher in Tacoma that I really liked working with. He mostly worked chief's jobs when I knew him, night chief's jobs and stuff like that. And when Donald B. McGregor retired from his assistant day chief's job handling the high wide loads and all the relief of the operators, Frank took that job for a little while. And well, I wasn't at Tacoma at the time anymore, but then
You
after
were a fireman on the Great Northern by then, weren't you?
yeah, and later a dispatcher on the Great Northern.
So Ed Berntsen, do you remember Frank Ryan?
Frank Ryan, sure. Very personable, easy to work with, good man.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Ed.
And Frank Ryan, from this era of telegraphers we were talking about, Frank Ryan and
Dick
Duke,
Leary and some of these other
some of
guys
the
were
others,
more too.
the folks over dispatchers when we were new telegraphers, Dave and I, they had in their 15, 20 years earlier, they had been working at a lot of the way stations that didn't have any and weren't open by the 1960s. Places like Dryad and um, um, on the South Bend branch, Francis, and places like that that had stations then. They were working at those stations. Um, and Dick Leary, just one quick anecdote about the operators, the dispatchers as operators. Dick Leary and Duke Stone, who was Gary Emmons' uncle, were operators in the 1945 and early 46 as all the troops were coming home from the war and being discharged at Fort Lewis and North Fort Lewis. And when they were released, they were all paid in cash in the 1940s for their transportation allowance to go home. So it happened that young telegraphers, Duke Tone and um, Dick Leary, were working together as ticket agents at Fort Lewis NP Depot, right near the Silicon DuPont Road crossing on I-5 right now.
Right, right.
And they said that the guys were coming in so fast, they were lined up out the door, all had cash, and they were selling tickets as fast as they could, and they didn't have time to count the money. They just dropped the money in a box, and clerks behind them would put in an empty box and take the full one and start counting the cash. But they were just selling, 40, 50, $100 tickets were a lot of money in 1942, and they just couldn't keep up with counting it. So they just took cash, handed them tickets as fast as they could, and it was a really busy time.
All right, moving along. Dave Sprau, who do we have here and why are they there?
They went up just to Ogle to take a look at a train wreck. This is up around Acme or Wickersham, and Donald McGregor, well dressed, on the left, and Don Shane on the right, dressed casually. But they both were just a couple train dispatchers in Tacoma that decided to drive up there and have a look at things.
Okay. So, yeah, it is kind of, I mean, he is pretty natty for going out and looking at a train derailment. So,
yeah, he was always nattily dressed, just nice guy, and he liked to make a good impression. Let's put it that way.
okay. Okay.
Huh.
Now where are we, Dave?
Well, this is how you make a good impression. You wear a necktie and do your hair, comb your hair nicely. I don't know when that was taken, but it was taken before the before the other ones, probably about 1964, 65, by Jim Fredrickson
In Tacoma.
in Tacoma.
Do you know which line you were dispatching by the background or not?
Well, I know it by the background. It couldn't have been the mountain because that would have been a solid background.
Okay.
Probably the double track south because of the opening there. The double track completely open area in front of it. So I'd say double track south.
Okay.
Was double track south Centralia to Vancouver Junction?
Well, yeah, it was Tacoma to Vancouver Junction in those days.
Okay.
Double track north was Tacoma to Seattle, and then on to Sumas.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked is because when I got out there, I think there was a Centralia South dispatcher and a Centralia North dispatcher.
Yeah, they'd kind of made Centralia the focal point where Tacoma used to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then there was a point line dispatcher, was what it was called, for Centralia to Tacoma in the 50s. And by the time we started dispatching in the 60s, the point line dispatcher was usually merged with the Centralia South, or the double track South dispatcher was Centralia to Vancouver. And as I recall, and the point line was merged into that job, so that it became Tacoma to Vancouver.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
That point line moved around quite a bit. When I was in my prime there in Tacoma, there was a separate train sheet that moved from the double track south office, where there was what they called a sideman during the day shift on the weekdays. And then that point line would move over to the double track north on the weekends, and also on the second shift and third shift. So there was a moving train sheet during those times. That would have been early 1970s to pretty much when the office moved to Seattle in, I think that was 82.
all right, Ken, thank you for bringing that in. A moving train sheet. You learn something every day. So, okay, now where are we, Dave? We're doing a couple of Dave pictures here. Dave's still looking good in these pictures.
I think that was taken the same night that Jim took the group picture. Me working double track north in July of
It's
19.
the same tie, isn't it? We've looked at these pictures a couple times, and yep, that's the same tie. So there you go.
I probably only own one tie.
Oh, Dave, that's great. Now here, Dave is looking more like a hippie. Dave, where is this?
Well, this is in the Seattle office just before it was moved down to Occidental Street. And I am working the territory between Whitefish and Sandpoint on CTC. So I guess the year would have been about 1985.
Okay, no more tie, long hair, you know. How did you like dispatching on the Great Northern?
Oh, I liked it. It was very enjoyable.
Okay.
I liked it. I mean, I don't mean to disparage the NP or the people I worked with there in any way, but there are some of those those dispatchers jobs on the NP were not really a lot of fun. The mountain was fun, but the double track north was a bunch of rubber stamps, and the double track south was just like herding a bunch of cats. And these Great Northern jobs were a little more challenging. They were single track, either train orders or CTC.
Mountain grades, different things to meet, and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, and good people to work with, just like at the NP. Now, I will say this: on the Great Northern, I had, for most of the years I worked there, I had the world's best boss, Edward Catane, and I won't go into any detail here because we need to get through this program. But that was thoroughly enjoyable working for a guy that would back up his train dispatchers, and if an official would come in and start giving you a bad time, he'd kick them right out of the office.
Yeah, EK. Ed Berntsen, you ran into Ed Catane a couple of times, right? No.
Say again?
You worked with Ed Catane at some point in time, right?
I did one day during a strike, and I was a manager.
Oh, okay. Ken Iverson, did you ever
But I
work with
worked with
Ed
him.
Catane?
I worked with him as a manager, working on train consists, passenger train movements and stuff. So excellent guy to work with. I certainly second that, but I never had much of occasion to work for him as a direct dispatcher.
Okay. All right.
Likewise for me, Jonathan. He retired pretty much before we all moved to Seattle, and Jack Dara was at the helm by the time they combined the Tacoma and Seattle offices.
I got to tell a story, and this is kind of crude, and I apologize in advance, but it tells you something about what kind of a man Catane was. I was working a trick job one day, and he came in and he told me, he says, I did something, and I forget what it was. He had done something, lined something up, and he says, I think you better time slip me on that because I did it as an expedient, but he says that's not the right way to do things, and he says you're entitled to a day's pay on that. And you should time slip me. And I said, oh, Ed, you're so good to us. If you needed to do that, I'll just kind of look the other way. I don't want to cause trouble for you. And you know what he said to me? He said, who in the hell gives a shit? You're entitled to it. Put in the time slip. And that it just stands alone as a comment because I have never had a chief dispatcher before or since ever say anything like that to me. And indeed, if I were the chief, I'm not even sure if I would say that because you got your neck stuck out a mile if you do stuff like that. But that shows how solid he was behind the men that were working for him and how serious he was about not doing anything to hurt anybody or to hurt the union agreement.
What's this, Dave?
See what it says there down in the corner?
I do, yeah, but the folks at home need to know more. And is that your garage next to it?
Next to it is the box car, or actually the outfit car at Canasket that they had placed there for extra telegraphers to live in while they were working there, or to batch in, I should say. And it was kind of a dump. Well, I bought this trailer and stuck it in there. The NP was really good about stuff like that. I'm not the only person that they allowed to have trailers on company property. I had mine at Canasket for, about 4 or 5 years. And this is a picture taken while I was parked there next to the company outfit car, sponging off the railroad using their water and using their electricity. And they didn't care. They said, that's fine.
Is that your car?
Yeah.
What were you driving at that point?
It looks to be like my 1966 red Chevelle SS 396, just from what I can see of it.
Oh, wow. Oh, you're a muscle guy. Oh, how about that?
Oh, yeah, I got to have that,
Yeah, okay. And now, did you have it the whole time at Canasket, or did it move around with you?
I had it at first at Easton, same kind of an arrangement. It was under the water tank at Easton. And then after that, I had it at Canasket. And finally, I moved it out of Canasket and onto some property that I owned over by Selleck. And then I built a house there and sold the trailer.
Oh, okay.
Dave Steinhoff, another one of my mentors. He's just a young man in this picture. This is earlier than some of the other Frederickson pictures. So I would say this is probably about middle 50s. Dave he's working the same job as that you asked me about, though, that we had Cameron Galbraith in Double Track South, and there's the
telegraph.
The local sounder in front of him. In those days, they worked the South Bend branch besides the main line, and South Bend branch to Raymond was all train orders, and he would have had to use that for branch line work. Dave was a good dispatcher. He was very fussy about how you did things. And he would not qualify me on the South Bend branch because I hadn't quite learned how to do things his way. And there was nothing wrong with doing things his way. He was very exhaustively competent about it. but I pulled a fast one on him. I broke in a couple of days later with Don Shane, who didn't do it Dave's way. He did it a real quick and dirty way that worked okay as long as nothing went wrong. Don qualified me on the job.
You know, the one thing that of course interests me is that he has the proverbial that what accountants call the green eye shade.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's just classic. So, and didn't he have family then that went on to the Milwaukee and the UP, George?
Yeah. So when I started working at Black River, I would occasionally interact with Dan Steinhoff, and Dan usually worked the East Side desk. So he worked everything from Maple Valley, and I think he got all the way over to when they expanded the districts into the Montana division. I think he got all the way over to St. Mary's or something like that.
He got
And
all the way to Avery, all the way to Avery for a while when I
yeah,
was at.
okay, yeah, that's right. And so once in a while when I was off duty, since I lived in Tacoma, I just dropped by and you just walk into the dispatcher's office. It's not a big deal. And I, made friends with Don Lair and Dave Steinhoff, or excuse me, Dan Steinhoff.
That's his
And
son, is that right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And then when the Milwaukee left the West Coast, Dan was, I don't know if he was offered a job or he put in for a job with UP. So in 1989, I was at a old timers convention in St. Louis, but we dropped by the Harriman Dispatcher Center at Omaha, and I ran into him. He was like a chief there, and then Jim Scammon, and I don't remember if there was any other Milwaukee dispatchers that had moved over there after their employment with Milwaukee. But Dan was Dan had a lot of good ideas, I understood, about on the UP, and Jim was. I remember seeing Jim. He was sitting right behind us in the bunker there when I was visiting with Warren Bolozarth, who dispatched the West Mountain out of La Grande, and Jim was the chief right behind him. So got to see a lot of friends, that I had known from the Milwaukee. Real
So
good deal.
the dispatchers are treated differently on the BN than they are on the UP, aren't they?
Uh, I don't know about the BN as far as how their contract is, but on UP they were made company officers, and it's my understanding on BN and other railroads
They were
they were
part of it like a
contract,
union.
union employees. So, but UP being the way they are, I'm sure they paid their guys good money, but not to be union employees. But that's just speculation.
So, BN dispatchers probably shouldn't be talking to UP dispatchers because that creates
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I never really had any problem with either roads dispatchers. I liked working with them all, whether it was at first as an operator or later as an engineer. I got along with everybody.
Well, of course you do, George. That's why you make such a great co-host on these programs.
Oh,
Grateful
here
to
it
have
comes.
George here as always. So we've got a few more. We're just coming up to the top of the hour. We got a few more reminiscences and people we'd like to talk about yet to go.
Well, there's Dave again, a little older without the green eye shade. Dan. He had two sons, Dan and Gary, and they both started out as operators on the NP. Then they went to the Milwaukee. Dan as an operator and dispatcher, and Gary became a conductor on the Milwaukee. And Gary was different than Dave and their dad. Gary was real laid back and just real jovial guy. Not to say that Dan and Dave weren't, but Gary just had a different personality, very, very unofficial about everything. And Dan and Dave were very good because they adhered to procedure. before I get myself in trouble, I'll just say they were all there.
Yeah, we better, yeah, okay. So this would be about 1950s, and this is the same man in the 1970s then, roughly?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay, all right. Got a pen protector and looks like he's working double track south, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yep. Okay.
Duke Tone.
Duke?
Duke was the nicest guy. He was just always cheerful and never had an unkind word. He had kind of an acid wit and could say things that weren't very nice sometimes, but even then he was jovial about it. He wasn't mean. He was a fairly good train dispatcher. You notice he's writing with his left hand. He's the only at risk of making somebody mad. He's the only guy I ever met that wrote with his left hand that had really good handwriting.
Oh,
Really good.
yeah.
Did he have a brother named, oh, well, I shouldn't ask the name of the brother, but didn't he have a brother that was a police officer or a sheriff's deputy in Pierce County?
He was related to half the town. He had a brother that was an operator, Eugene Tone, and also was a principal, I believe, at Clover Park High School or one of the high schools. And then he was related to the Emmons family through marriage. There's a whole bunch of them. So yeah, the answer is probably.
Bud Emmons was photographer at our wedding in 1981. So there's another tie-in.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Ed, do you remember Duke or Dwayne Douglas Tone?
Who, me, Berntsen?
Yeah, you Berntsen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tell me more.
Super guy to work with. He later on in his dispatching career, he would write a column of narrative for the BN West Credit Union newsletter about what was happening to the various members of the credit union. But working with him was just very much a pleasure. And as has been mentioned, this is Gary Emmons' uncle.
Yes, I did hear that. Yeah.
And he's one of the guys. He was one of the guys, along with Dick Leary, they were throwing the cash on the floor because they didn't have time to count it, selling tickets into World War II. But also, there was the Tone family, headed up by Ralph Tone, who was in the early 60s was chief yard clerk at Tacoma Yard. The Tone family, as I mentioned, Eugene Tone was an operator in the early 60s for the NP at McCarver Street Station in Tacoma. Later became a senior officer in the Tacoma Public School District. So the Emmons side of the family, with A.B. Emmons, was chief dispatcher. Gary's uncle or Gary's grandfather was A.B. Emmons, who had been at Northern Pacific and Milwaukee dispatcher in the Minnesota, and then came to Seattle in the Depression. He was chief dispatcher in Tacoma in the early 60s. Sorry, I should have shut off my phone. Anyway, Tones and there were several Tones and Emmons around the country, around the West here with them.
Okay, moving along. You know, this is one of those programs that people are going to go, wow, this is really interesting, or wow, this is really boring. So it depends if you're interested in who some of these people were once upon a time. Dave,
Jimmy
come
White.
on. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
No, it's Jimmy Wise. Hey, I choked on a sandwich, and I'm going to need about a minute to get my voice back. Ed, why don't you just go ahead and tell him about Jim?
Okay, Ed, you got on mute. We're getting Ed unmuted. Ken, you didn't work with him. He was before your time, I'm guessing?
Nope. No, he was definitely around and just a real nice guy. I think he worked a relief job, but I worked a lot with him. And yeah, he was a little older than some of the other guys, like the Steinhoff and Dick Leary and some of those. But so he retired a little bit earlier than they did. But I worked with him a lot. Good guy, loved him.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Well, and Ken, I'm going to keep poking you to keep chiming in about some of these people, because we're interested in what you know about some of these folks too. We're glad you're here with us today. So,
Yeah, just a comment. I don't know if you've got a picture, but Gary Emmons had a sister named Jan, who was the first trick steno in the dispatcher's office when I started there. So, I mean, it was good to see the feminine aspect of some of these families involved with railroading too. She was still working when I was director of administration in the latter part of my career, and she was basically an administrative assistant down at Tacoma. So it was she was just a great lady too. That whole family was fabulous.
oh yeah. From the little I know them, I just really think they're just wonderful people. So, Davis,
Hey, I'm back. Jim Wise had a brother, Glenn Wise. Glenn was an operator at Arlington, but he, unlike Jim, Glenn was kind of a pugilist, and he liked to argue and fight with everybody, and he finally managed to get himself fired. That's all I'm going to say. But Jim was totally not like that. Jim was just a really agreeable guy and a very competent train dispatcher. He knew exactly, what he needed to be doing, and he did it.
and this is in Tacoma somewhere. I can't quite see that. I could see it's August, but I can't quite see what year it is on the calendar.
Yeah, that's the assistant chief dispatcher's desk in Tacoma.
Okay. Well, we're coming along, folks. We're just past the top of the hour. Oh boy, I'll see if these are some of the last ones we've added, Dave, and I'm doing the best I can with these. Who are these guys?
Well, I think you did good. That's taken at Easton in 1960, and that's the helper crew, so to speak. In the distant background there, you can see that dining car that was set up at Easton as a restaurant.
Yeah.
I don't know who the dog is, but
I was going to ask you that.
the guy on the left is the helper pilot, Glenn Allison. Next to him is the helper engineer. Now, that job usually belonged in my days to Gordon Colson, but I think Gordon Colson was laying off, and that is Shell Asplund. The guy next to Shell Asplund is Joe Brummett. He was the helper fireman. Joe is the father of Tenny and Louis Brummett, who were switchmen in Seattle. And Joe later became an old head engineer, but in this picture, he's just a fireman. Not even promoted yet.
What year do you think this is? This would be 50s?
This is 1960.
1960. Okay.
After they'd renumbered the FTs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you know Al Farrow?
Hell yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I don't recall seeing any photos of Al Farrow. I just know I saw photos that he took, like the one out the front door of his F unit waiting on the eastbound to come in the hole there at, I don't know, I think it was around Easton or somewhere. And I just never saw any photos of him, just some of his work.
I don't recall ever seeing a picture of him either.
He wasn't he didn't discriminate about roads. He was an NP guy and he got plenty of NP shots, but he also shot some good stuff of Milwaukee and UP, and some of the best ones I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Al Farrow and my grandfather were very good friends and were deacons at the same church. I met Al. I was probably 4 or 5 years old and took my first engine ride at 6 years old at Auburn Yard with Al.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I was glad you're.
I have a few pictures of Al, but yeah, admittedly they are rare. There's not a lot of pictures of him. The guy on the right in this picture is Verl King. He was the engine watchman. In other words, he was a flunky who fueled the engines, sanded the engines, changed brake shoes if needed, and just generally did the hostling work and the mechanics work to the extent that you could at a place like Easton. And poor Verl, he was the victim of this horrible practical joke that Joe Brummett and I pulled on him that's told about in one of Ruth X's books in a story authored by Ed Ray Jr. The story is too long and too too unacceptable for polite society to tell here, but Verl
Not
was a good
appropriate for a family setting, folks. So,
well, Verl was a good guy, and he took it okay. He
well,
took
let's
the
keep
joke.
going. We got a few more pictures to look at. We're getting into we're getting into the last. We've got, I think, 7 or 8 more pictures left to go.
Okay.
So that's
the CTC machine and interlocking machine combined at Easton, Washington. I throw this in just because a lot of people, most everybody doesn't understand how any of that worked at Easton. They think the whole thing was CTC. Well, it wasn't. On the right-hand side of the machine, starting at the top, you have the eastward siding at Stampede, and then you have the eastward main track at Stampede, and then you have the westward main at Stampede, all of which go into a single track through the Stampede tunnel. And then they come out farther to the left, with the eastward track at Martin being at the top, the westward track at Martin being in the middle, and the westward siding at Martin being on the bottom. Then you'll notice there's a gap, and that's no longer, after you leave Martin, it's no longer CTC. You get down to Easton, and there's a set of levers and some controls that will put trains back from the eastward track into the single track. And the very far track at the top on the left-hand side is the siding at Easton. So what we would do is, with all the eastward trains, is run them into that single track at the bottom on the left. All the westward trains would come into town at the bottom on the left, and we would line them straight through onto the westward track, and that's all interlocking there, not CTC.
Hey, didn't they have a staff system before that?
Yeah, they did. They had operators around the clock at Martin and Stampede and a staff system.
Yeah.
Totally different. This replaced the staff system effective at midnight on December 31, 1958.
Thank you.
Is that a transistor radio on top of the CTC machine?
Yes, it is, but it wasn't used for that purpose.
What was it used for?
We had a clandestine loudspeaker system. You take an induction coil that you could get from Radio Shack and wire one side of the coil to the chassis of a radio, and the other wire went to the center volume, the center terminal on the volume control. And then you snip off the wire that goes to the tuner so that you can't get any actual music or voice out of the thing. And now you've made a loudspeaker for your telephone outfit. You put the induction coil down underneath the desk next to the incoming company induction coil on the telephone. We didn't have to wear a headset through that clandestine outfit. Now, the communications department didn't like us doing that. And so when one of their people would come around, we would just turn that thing off and use the headset like we were supposed to. But the rest of the time, having that thing you could have the dispatcher's voice and any other telephone conversation come into the office on the loudspeaker, and we didn't have to wear that headset.
Is that a voltmeter there on the upper left of the machine?
Yeah, it's a Weston DC voltmeter, and I don't know what good it did. I mean, it would tell you if your indications were coming in and out, but so did the indication light. I guess if you were a signal maintainer, you could look at it and determine the strength of the direct current voltage that was coming in, maybe tell you something about whether your circuits were in trouble.
Ken, did you ever work here?
Yes, I did. Not the second day ever on the mountain for me was Easton. The first day was Leicester on December 11, 1960. But on Christmas Eve, December 24, 1960, the second trick operator, Elmer Schweppe, I think at Easton, got sick. So a third trick operator, 16-year-old Dave Sprau, moved up to second trick 4 to midnight. And I was deadheaded on an emergency basis in the cab of number 26, the North Coast Limited out of East Auburn at 2 p.m. And we were due by Easton without stopping at 4:04 p.m. And Jimmy Darker, the engineer, slowed just enough that I could crawl down the cab, fireman's side, and step down. They threw my grip after me. And suddenly I was at Easton and I'd been on duty for 4 minutes. And I wasn't yet qualified on the property. So second trick telegrapher Dave Sprau instructed me on the operation, and the signal maintainer was there to instruct me on the operation of the CTC machine and the dual control switch at Easton. And Dave instructed me on how to call the crew and things for the helper if necessary, if instructed by the dispatcher. Christmas Eve, 1924, it, of course, dark at 4 o'clock. And I was all by myself after about an hour of introduction. And here's this whining sound, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And it came from the right and then moved by to the left. Turns out it was a Milwaukee electric train about 200 feet to the north of us, looking out the window at the NP double track. It was about 200 feet north of that. And they were in regenerative braking or whatever you call it, coming down the hill in the electrified mode. And that was my introduction to the Milwaukee Railroad. But it was quite a fascinating moment as my second day on the mountain. And thanks, Dave, for breaking me in.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Ed and Ken.
Yeah, I worked two shifts there. Was probably about 1971. So things had changed an awful lot between when Dave and Ed were describing it and when I got it. But yeah, I was lucky enough to get 2 days in there, and it was kind of a fun time. So that's me.
Great. So you didn't rewire this, Ken, with your, expertise in electronics, you didn't rewire this for anybody or anything, did you?
I don't remember that particular radio, but we had those kind of things set up at just about every place. And I think the reason the communication guys didn't like it is because we kept our circuits open all the time, and it kind of threw off the impedance for the whole circuit. But we got away with it, and being kind of hands-free and without those headsets, it was a lot easier to work, and quite frankly, a lot more fun to work when you didn't have to have that headset hanging on your ear. And those were not very comfortable, not like today's really nice hi-fi headsets. So they were kind of crude.
I had a question about the Milwaukee. Since you guys had a station at Easton on your side, did the Milwaukee have an operator over on the other side?
No, they had a station and they would open it if detours were going on, stuff like that. But
Okay.
their station had been closed since about the end of World War II.
Okay,
Thank you.
good question. Let's keep going. We've got a few images left.
I defer to Alan Miller for this one.
Alan, who do we got here? Hopefully, Alan, you're still here.
Yeah, this is Leah Carroll's 100th birthday celebration, and she's the gal in the front there holding the Milwaukee sign, and she was a Milwaukee Road telegrapher and worked on the started out over on the Idaho division in Eastern Washington with her husband Hurley Carroll, and then they transferred over to the Coast Division in 1920 when they had a division realignment because of the new electrification going in. But she had a lot of great stories to tell about working on the Milwaukee Road. And one I remember, she was working up at Garcia, and they had a little lean-to shack at I think it was at the west end of the siding somewhere that she stayed in when she would be up there. She had a sack with a tin stove in it and another thing with her clothes and stuff, a bedroll, and she'd get off the train there and make camp in that lean-to, and she'd come to work at night, and the guy says, Leah, did you walk up here all this way in the dark? And she says, yeah. He's like, "Oh my gosh," he said, "there's cougars and bears running around up here and stuff." And he was so worried. She said she wasn't worried at all about being attacked by an animal up there, but she was a pretty tough old gal.
Do we know who
And
any of
then,
the other people are here?
yeah, the guy up on the upper right is Bob Freeman. He was a Milwaukee
Oh,
Road operator and clerk.
yep.
And then the gal in the middle is Tungsten, wasn't it, Dave?
That's Doris Tuntlin. She's Roger Campbell's sister, and Roger was a clerk for the NP, and she was a clerk for the Milwaukee. Worked with Leah at Auburn Depot on the Milwaukee.
Yeah. And then me on the left there, and Dave right below me.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I was wondering, I thought those guys looked kind of familiar, and now we know the answers. Yep. Okay.
Uh,
That's why
when
Dave wanted you to handle this one, I could tell. So,
when this party was over, I mean, at the end of it, she's got a couple of canes there. She could walk pretty well with those canes, and she got up and walked to the podium and stood there and thanked us all for coming and kind of made everybody feel at home. And she says, "Now I'd like to invite all of you to come back next year for my 101st." And then she looked around and she says, "That is, if you're still around." and,
Yeah,
and she was, and
she
she was
told me, yeah, she told me once that she said she'd get up in the morning and get the paper. She'd look in the obituary column, and if she didn't see her name in there, then she'd get a pot of coffee going and get her day started.
and
Yep.
she went out just the way she would have liked. At 100, she had gone past 102 years old. She was out in the front yard mowing her lawn, pushing a lawnmower, and she keeled over dead. And that was the end.
it's a
Pushing
great-
a lawnmower at 102 years old.
Where was her birthday party at? Where is this picture taken?
The senior center at Auburn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Bob Freeman, that's a name. Alan Miller, Dave Sprau. Thanks for, these, we just added these right at the last second before today's program. So glad we were able to squeeze them in. Let's see, who do we have here now?
Oh, that's a gathering of some of my friends. I think it was one of my birthday parties. Don Shane on the left and Dick Leary. And then
Okay.
Dale Voss, the engineer, and the next guy next to Leary. He was a telegrapher on the NP, but he and I both went to the Great Northern as firemen. He stayed there and became an old head engineer. And then Jack Dara. And next to Jack Dara is me. And just underneath me, that's Ann Denman. She was a Great Northern telegrapher from Skykomish, lived in my hometown, Monroe, Washington. And then Sammy Watterson, the famous NP engineer. And the final guy on the right is Dave Steinhoff.
Oh, wow. Oh, my. Oh, we can watch the span of his lifetime in one presentation, folks. That's nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Any comments from Ken or Ed on this photo? Before I move on, we've only got, I think, 2 or 3 photos left now. So, oopsie, hang on here.
Oh, you dropped your watch.
No, I'm fine. I just got to go to the next image. There. Now, okay.
It's a whole bunch of Milwaukee people. And again, I would defer to, well, except for me, it's a whole bunch of Milwaukee people. I again would defer to Alan Miller, but I got a cheat sheet here, Alan, if you.
Yeah, you know more about this than I do. I think this was is it Geelhart's funeral or?
Yeah, it was kind of a sad occasion. It was Cecil Geelhart's funeral, but we decided we better, line up and get our pictures taken. And from left to right is Dan Sokolowski in the car department. The next guy is Jerry Schrader, a Milwaukee conductor.
Yeah, right. He was in our program that we just did on the Kent Autoload. He was the conductor on that special train.
Oh, he was the brakeman.
Brakeman, sorry.
Fritzy Krems was the conductor. Then the next guy is myself. And then we have Wayne Ferrier, who was a road foreman or traveling engineer and train master for a long time, but he finished out his career as an engineer because they made more money. So he went back to being an engineer. And then,
he came over to the BN.
Yeah, he did. He became an engineer on the BN. The guy on the next to him is Bob Freeman.
Okay, yeah, we just saw Bob a minute ago.
Yep. Next to Bob Freeman is Bob Finnegan, who had he'd been a safety guy for the Milwaukee safety and rules guy for many years. But as he told me, when the Sioux Line took over the Milwaukee, they kicked him out of the rules department. So he went to the dispatcher's office at Milwaukee and started looking around. And pretty soon he said those dispatchers all figured out what he was doing. He was looking for a job to bump. And he says, you can imagine how popular I was. And he says they all kind of looked like a bunch of sheep trying to hide from the slaughterhouse man. And he says I finally did pick one of them to bump, but he says they were a bunch of good guys to work with. They just weren't very happy to see me with my number one on the seniority list date on the first day I showed up. Anyway, next to Bob, that's Butte Fennell, conductor.
Okay.
Next to Butte Fennell is Jimmy Irwin, agent at Cedar Falls. After 1958, Jimmy had been a train dispatcher before that in Tacoma. He finally gave up being a dispatcher because they kept consolidating divisions and pulling off jobs and stuff. He kept getting kicked out and back as an operator anyway. And he finally said, to hell with it. I may as well just go back and stay there. Took the agency at Cedar Falls. Okay, next to him is Jim Scammon, Milwaukee operator, then train dispatcher. And then finally a guy who went to the UP. And next to him is Jim Foster, signal maintainer. And the final guy on the right is Bob Shanklin. He'd been the chief carpenter for the Milwaukee. By this time, he had been basically the superintendent for the POVA, the
Ponderay Valley. Yeah, well, yeah. So
we're all gathered for a rather sad occasion for Cecil Gielhart's funeral in March 2008.
Well, Bob Shanklin is a guy that, you know what, I never met Mr. Shanklin, but his legacy certainly predates him. He was a B&B guy. He helped Frank Zellerhoff rewire the dock at Pier 27. And him and Frankie got along pretty well. And so then he went on to the Seattle and North Coast and worked there for a few years. And in fact, in our program on that, he was in the Suburban that followed the last train on the rails. And then he went to POVA, Ponderay Valley, and helped the Port of Ponderay develop a shop up there that repaired railroad locomotives. And I know of this historic group, Cascade Rail Foundation, that during Bob's time shipped their locomotive there, Milwaukee Road 5057. And then sadly, Bob is no longer with us. I met his second wife out at Squim a couple years ago. They met bowling, and everybody I've ever talked to about Bob Shanklin just talks about what a wonderful, wonderful person he was. Alan, you knew him too. Go ahead, Dave.
He was he was supposed to just be an old B&B bridge carpenter, but that's not even close. He was a true railroad man. He could do anything. He was a sharp guy and just really nice too. And boy, I'll tell you, I wish he was still around because he could tell some pretty good stories, and they were all accurate and interesting. Just a real good guy.
Alan, did you ever bump into him?
Yeah, I've met him a few times, and my brother-in-law worked on the bridge and building crew, so he was his boss.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We've got, I think, 3 images left. So, all right, let's see who we got here.
That's just a quickie that I found. I got a better one. I wrote on that one so that for posterity. That was just a gathering at the Poodle Dog of ex Milwaukee employees, of which I am not, but these are all my friends throughout my career, so I usually go to those things. Eddie Manuel on the left. Hey, Alan, I want to defer to Alan to tell about some of these guys. I'll identify him and we'll turn it over to Alan. Eddie Manuel on the left, then next to him, Ron Gideon, then Bob Finnegan, and down at the bottom there, me, and then back up again, Don Lahr, and finally Jim Scammon, and just one of the yearly lunches at the Poodle Dog in Fife. And Alan was usually at these things, but he wasn't at this one. So the penalty for not showing up is you got to tell about these guys once more quickly.
Yeah, well, Ed Emanuel was my boss when I was the operator at Everett, and so he was a real good guy to work for. I got along with him great, and I usually came to these functions at the Poodle Dog via Ed. Ed would get a hold of me and let me know that there was one coming up, and then I'd come down to Marysville and meet him and ride over with him. And later, Ed became involved with the Seattle North Coast. He worked out of an office in North Seattle and was their rate guy, I believe. And then Ron Gideon, he was agent at Warden. And then when they closed that station, he ended up bumping over into Sumner and was the agent at Sumner the last I knew of him. And then Bob Finnegan was the safety guy. I remember working at Kent one time, and he showed up there with a movie for us to watch. And I was in there trying to get my work done, and he insisted I come in there and watch this movie with the rest of the train crew and stuff. So the dispatcher rang me up, put out an order or message or something, and I went in there and took that call. And then I figured they could just go on with their movie, and pretty soon Bob sticks his head in the door. He says, "Are you coming back? We're waiting on you." So I ended up having to watch this safety film. And then Don Lahr, he was a good dispatcher to work with. He's the one that used to, when I worked up at Cedar Falls, he put out the train order to the Snoqualmie turn, and he'd put it out as engine 615.
Did you have lunch?
I will have. He put out the order, like he'd say, engine 615, run extra Moncton, CEDARFALLS to Snoqualmie Falls. And I'd repeat it back the same way. And one time the operator at Maple Valley came on and he says, "What the hell's going on with you guys? You say one name and then you spell a different one." And Don just kind of laughs. It's just a private joke between me and Alan. And then Jimmy Scammon, and he's still kicking around as far as I know. Was a train dispatcher. I never worked with him too often. I think he was mostly on third trek, which I tried to avoid. But
I got a couple of comments about Don Lahr and Jim Scammon. So we became friends with Don Lahr. We used to visit with him and his wife at their house, and he and I went on a couple of photo trips up into the Cascades. And when the Milwaukee quit the West Coast, then Don went to UP, but I don't think he went to Omaha. I think he retired out of the Portland dispatching office for UP. And then I talked to him a few years ago, and he was living on Fox Island. And then Jim Scammon and I did a dual interview for the Inland TV network up in the Cle Elum area at the Iron Horse Inn in 2017 when they did the Milwaukee Employees Luncheon at Iron Horse. And so if you call the Inland TV network in Cle Elum, you may be able to get a copy of that along with other employees that work for them.
It's an interesting thought, George. We'll follow up on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Speaking of hey, Ron Gideon there, he came to work for the BN after the Milwaukee folded. He was one of the guys that the BN sent over to Cle Elum to reopen the depot at Cle Elum for train order operation for that very short period of time in 1985 when they had to open Stampede Pass, much to their chagrin. Anyway, Ron was one of the operators that went to Easton or to Cle Elum on the BN and worked there. His dad was Gus Gideon, an NP engineer at Centralia. And I never did hear why Ron never went to work for the NP, but he didn't.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, do you know whose idea it was to open that Stampede lineup during that 1985 outage on the main line there?
Is that
Yes,
Ken
it was Ken
Iverson?
Iverson.
Yep, I came up with that. That was one of the few times I was able to talk Ed Butler into doing something intelligent.
Well, you know, after they opened it, and then when they didn't need it anymore, Jerry Vaden tried to keep it open because he was so impressed with the performance. And in fact, he had one of the road foremen ride a train through there with a flashlight and pay attention to whether a double stack would actually go through the tunnel or not. And it was reported back that yes, it will, but it only clears by about 1 inch. And anyway, they tried to keep it open because they were impressed with the performance. And somebody got a hold of that back in Overland Park, and they just about fired Vaden over that. Vaden said to me, "God," he says, "I wish I hadn't done that. They just about had my tail end." You know.
So Ken, just coming back to you, it's a little bit off track, but we're on track. Why did they reopen this line? Why did you think it was a good idea, and what did it accomplish?
There was a bridge just east of Wenatchee I think it was a big fire, and it put that bridge out of service for quite a while, a couple weeks, maybe even 3. And so we only had one line. Then it would go east, and that was the old SP&S. And it just seemed like to have a little bit of relief on that line, that we could run trains over Stampede. We had to be careful about the cars. So they actually set up this device there at Auburn, and if you knocked the bar off the top, you couldn't go. So, but it was quite an operation, and it's one of the things I look back upon with a great deal of pride. I really had fun doing that little trick.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we got a chance to bring that up, Ken, and thanks for sharing that story.
The straw that broke the camel's back, though, was Ken is absolutely correct. But if you remember right, Ken, finally they had a derailment on the SP&S, and that stopped everything. And so they were only too happy to accept your suggestion.
Moving on, Dave, who do we have here?
He's a legendary figure.
Okay, tell me more.
He was once a very suave, handsome young man. He's working for the Northern Pacific, and he was a train dispatcher on the NP. His name was Norman C. Peterson. And we are not going to use this for tell stories about Pete, but believe me, there's plenty of them. He was a legendary figure. Finally, he quit the NP and he went to work for the Alaska Railroad. Then he worked for the Great Northern. Then he worked for the Western Pacific. And then he went to work for the Portland Terminal Company. And he had a little bit of misfortune everywhere he went. But finally, he showed back up at Auburn one day. And we snapped this picture of him. And he was in the company of Bill Brandenburg, an NP agent at Tacoma, who was his friend. And after many years, I was glad to see Pete, but he was no longer the suave young man that he had been in his youth. And strangely enough, my aunt, my mother's sister, had dated him in high school.
Oh my.
And she was proud of telling me that she says, I dated Norman Peterson in high school. Did you work with him? And I said, oh yeah, I knew Pete. So I took this picture and showed it to her, to my aunt. And I said, you know who this is? And she says, no. She says, oh my God, who's that guy? And I says, that's Norman Peterson. She couldn't believe it. You know, anyway, I like Pete. He was a legendary figure, and he managed to get in a few scrapes. But I was pretty happy to see him when we took this picture.
Dave, would he have been working at VC Telegraph in Portland in the early 60s?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure I remember sending and receiving stuff to him from WR by Morse.
Yeah, he was good Morse man. He worked at VC, but not for very long, for the very same reason that he didn't work very many other places for very long. But I won't go into that.
Right. Yeah. So at this point, I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to come back on camera. And I'm going to thank everybody for being here. I thought that this was, we spend a lot of time looking at trains, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about the people that made it all happen. And so this was a fun opportunity for us to, reminisce about some of these people that are, sadly no longer with us. And between our group of bishops or deacons or whatever, Dave and Alan and Ed and Ken, we've had some fun looking at people from the past. Does we have any commentary from the audience at this point? Otherwise, we're going to start moving to adjournment. Eric, go ahead, please. Eric and then Joel. See how they do that hand thing, Dave? So Eric, go ahead, please. Need to unmute.
Okay, there I got the mute off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, number one, if we want to see a good picture of Alfaro in Jim Fredrickson's Railscapes book, page 152.
Okay, thank you.
Also,
Thank you. I've got the book.
Yeah, Dave's got it right at his fingertips. Look at this.
that
was a setup, folks.
And the subtitle to that Railscapes book is A Northern Pacific Brass Pounders album. And I was wondering to myself, well, what does that mean, brass pounders? And my guess is it's the telegraph stuff.
Telegrapher.
Right?
Telegraphers are brass pounders. Is that right, Dave Sprau?
Yeah, that's right. If you're using a hand key on there.
Okay.
Okay.
And,
And I want to keep going here. In the same vein, I heard Dave refer to sounder a lot related to the telegraph. And is that why they named the Sound Transit sounder trains sounders, or is it because of Puget Sound?
I think it's Puget Sound. I think that the concept of a telegraph sounder would be a little bit beyond their comprehension.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be new and hip and cool. So
I got a third and last thing. I'd like to know if anybody knew Jerry Bergman working for the NP.
Yes.
Ed, go ahead, please.
He was trainmaster at Auburn in the early 60s. He became superintendent of transportation on the BN the month I left.
In my grade school in the 60s, in our neighborhood we had Jeff and Jerry Bergman, who were youngsters, and their dad. What I remembered was he worked in Centralia, and I always thought Centralia was in Illinois.
There is one there.
Yeah, but that's how much I knew about geography in the 1960s. But I just wanted to confirm: is that the same Jerry Bergman? That would he have been the guy living in South Seattle by kind of near Normandy Park?
Oh. Yeah, he lived in Normandy Park. His son Jerry was an engineer on the BN. Totally different guy than the old man. But yeah, they're father and son.
And I ran into the son Jeff. I think it was in 1998. He was at Interbay in the shop, and he gave the Fobner group a tour. That was a bit of a surprise to see young Jeff here, who I hadn't seen, because they moved away, I think, in the late 60s. I don't know where they moved to, but
Fargo.
Fargo?
Yeah, he went from Centralia to Fargo and then back to Auburn. And then from there, the senior Jerry, the railroad company officer guy who we're talking about now.
All right. Well, thanks for filling in.
There's Railscapes, all right. I've got a copy of that myself. Joel McCurry's got his hand up. Joel, go ahead, please.
So, Dave, I understand that there was a little incident with you and your hairstyle that someone came into the the station and had a few words with you about that. Do you remember that?
The only thing I remember is engineer Keith Frost came in one night when I was working the assistant chief's job, and my hair was a little long, and he started to get on my case about it. And I just this was in the 70s when everybody's hair was, and I just told him, I basically told him to go pound sand. And really, I can't remember anything else, but I'm not, if you remember something I don't, feel free to tell it. You're not going to embarrass me.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Well,
Let's hear the inside story.
We need that.
so apparently, you pointed to a picture on the wall and said,
Oh, that incident.
Yeah, the master mechanic told me to shave off my beard when I was a fireman. And I pointed, there just happened to be a picture of Jim Hill on the wall of his office. And I pointed at the picture. He had a beard. We never heard no more about it.
Well, while we're here, there's one that I want to bring up, and that was when Dave was a young telegrapher at Leicester, and the train went through Leicester at about 40 miles an hour, and Dave had to hoop orders up to that eastbound train. And who was driving that train, Dave?
That was at Easton, and the train was going from the eastward main to the single track. And I needed, you had to hand up by hand all the orders to the eastbound train. And this, most of the engineers would go through there a lot slower than they needed to. The speed limit was 35. And most of them would go through there at about 15 or 20. And I was used to that. And along comes this train, just scared the hell out of me. I almost jumped back, and they almost didn't get their orders because he was going the speed limit, 35. Well, I got into the office after the train went by, and I said to Jim Fredrickson when I OS'd them through there, I said, "Who in the world was that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Jack Christensen." Oh, okay. All right.
Way to go, Jack.
Jack, we just had to get you in there one more time, buddy. So what do you got to say about that, Jack, while we've got you here? Get Jack to unmute. 99, folks, and he's better at a computer than I am, let's face it.
You understand, there was nothing wrong with what he was doing.
We know that. Yeah.
I just wasn't used to that, and he scared the hell out of me. After that, a few other engineers did it. It didn't bother me so much.
Right. No, I hooped up a couple orders once early in my, couple times, and when those trains go roaring by you, man, they go, I mean, it just kind of scares the hell out of you. So, well, folks, we're at the bottom. Oh gosh, we're almost at 3 o'clock. So this has gone on for a while, and I want to thank all of the survivors on today's program. We'll have a vote and decide who we're going to kick off the island next season. So we've had a fun 2025 campaign, and I appreciate everyone in our audience for persevering and enjoying these programs. It's been a lot of fun. This is the end of our 6th season of the PNRA Cascade Rail Foundation programs. We started this out during COVID as a way of keeping in touch with each other, and it's evolved into a more of a programmatic format these days. So, like I say, I'm going to be off for the month of December. I've got some projects I need to start working on, a little bit more involved. We'll be back in January 7th. Dale Sanders this is just an unbelievably good show. And then Bond French with the Jim Neubauer collection. I mean, it's an honor for a program like ours to be able to have frankly, a big name star like Bond with us, and George will be helping out that day and making sure that everything goes smoothly. I'll be working on some plumbing projects right about that time, so I'm not quite sure what's all going to happen. And then to Dave, of course, dear friend, we've done a number of programs with Dave, and if you haven't taken a minute, these programs, these Zoom recordings, we put them online, and they go online in a channel called JF Junction, and you can see some of Dave's other interviews that we've done, we did a train sheet program. Dave and I have spent a number of quality programs together. And if you haven't taken a second, go ahead and if you're over there, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to that channel? And George and Alan and I will be working on some projects over the next couple of weeks that are going to go direct to YouTube. And if you're subscribed to that channel, then you'll know when we drop those programs. So,
Hey, Alan's programs about the Milwaukee are outstanding, so don't forget to take those in.
Yeah,
that
so oh yeah, no, we don't use YouTube as a storage medium. No, we keep copies of these programs. We record them on the local computer, and then I have a drive specifically that I just keep all of this stuff on. So that to answer that question. We first few years we never recorded any of these, and it's kind of a shame when we look back now because there was some neat stuff. But we do record these, and this is similar to a program that Dave, Allen, and I worked on, at some time ago. So thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for a very, very successful 2025 campaign. Do I have anything more from our esteemed group of bishops before I bid adieu to this year? So going once, going twice. And thanks for the comments, John. I appreciate those. Those are very helpful. And
it's been a good series.
We have brought a few people back as we can and tried to capture some of our older programs. So anyway, it's fun doing this stuff, but it's more fun when you've got an audience, and it's more fun than we're with our friends. So Jack Christensen, I see you've unmuted. Jack, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Now, do you remember running Dave Sprau over on that train at Easton?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was 30 miles an hour, but uh, yeah, I do remember him.
You got any
yeah.
good Dave Sprau stories for us, Jack, before I wish you a happy Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're still here. Number 99 for me. A lot to be thankful for is still here.
Absolutely. An inspiration to us all, folks.
Yeah.
And Tony White, president of the NRHS, is with us. Tony, welcome. We're honored to have you in our audience today, sir. Do you want to come online and say something quick about NRHS? I'm on the board of the Tacoma chapter of the NRHS with Mike Bergman and John Tucker and Michael Sawyer is here who worked quite a bit on Rail Camp for us this year. Tony, if you're with us, why don't you come on quick? You are. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a very interesting show. My primary chapter is the Western Connecticut chapter. We have the Sono Switch Tower Museum. And so we have a lot of former tower operators and also railroaders that hang out. And our Zoom meetings, which happens a couple of times a month, tends to have about 40 railroaders who remember every detail of every inch of the rail they ran. So the meetings tend to be tedious, but it's very good. And I thank, I guess, Ed Berntsen for inviting me. Thank you, Ed.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you, Ed. And Tony, of course, now that I've connected with you on camera, you realize that I'm quite capable of doing this, saying, hey, I need you to be a guest on a program, maybe in our 2026 season. So is it okay to contact you and see if we could line something up? How's that sound?
Well, I don't take pictures.
That's okay. But you could talk about what NRHS does,
Oh, well, sure.
programs that you guys offer, and why it's important to be a member. And we it's not just train pictures with us, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could talk about that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So a lead for next year. George, make a note. We never stop selling. So
Can I take a minute and make a tribute?
please go ahead.
So on on my ID line there on my picture. Uh, so it shows George and Vicky Foster now instead of just George Foster. And that's fine with me because at times when I was out chasing trains, I took Vicky along and she actually took some photos for me. And then she took the series of photos of me working in Argo Tower. So there's a little tribute. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she's also a good supporter of my work on the railroad, and uh, she put up with all the oddball hours and different things that happened. But she was a trooper and she was a good wife. So just wanted to add that.
Well, I think all of us can say that we married up, you know?
I definitely did.
Yeah, I definitely did. So thank you, George. And George is just been a real asset and co-host, and we've been working on a lot of really neat programs. And as Dave mentioned, the programs that Alan has done on the Milwaukee Road that are either on the Cascade Rail Foundation channel or on our channel, my channel, JF Junction, are Alan's just done some great stuff. And all I can say is I pushed the play button. I don't deserve much other credit than that. And Alan's got a couple. Alan, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still lurking.
Yeah, okay. What do we got in the on deck circle for programs coming up? You just let the audience know. And
Well, I got two more videos I did. One's on the Enumclaw line, Milwaukee Road's Enumclaw branch, and the other one is on Milwaukee Road station of Corfu over in eastern Washington between Beverly and Othello.
I thought that was an island in the Aegean Sea.
What's that?
I thought it was an island in the Aegean Sea.
Yeah, it's the largest of the Ionian Islands.
Well, there you go. So,
Well, the one in the Aegean Sea is Corfu Junior.
there you go. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for, like I say, it's like Survivor today. Here we are at the 2 hour mark. So again, thanks to Dave filling in for a couple of guests that just had things come up the day before Thanksgiving. And Alan and George, of course, for their commentary. Michael, Ken Iverson. Thanks everybody for being here. Okay, one more time, George. Anything more before we go?
Yes, real quick. Just want to acknowledge my buddy there, Stephen Howes, and our time are going up to Sumter Valley, and we get together. We need to get together some more there in the Tri-Cities and stuff. But been a good buddy, and I appreciate it.
Well, we should do lunch one of these days. And
yeah, we will.
When the railroad opens back up in the spring, we need to make another trip.
Sounds good to me.
There you go.
Thanks,
Support the
Steve.
Sumter Valley, folks. It's always, they're just, what a miracle.
Great operation
out there. It's so neat.
Yep.
So before I let anybody go, so Tony, you're in Connecticut. What's the weather like back there today, sir? You got on mute. I know I do this to people.
Okay, well, actually, 2 years ago, I moved south. I now live in Delaware.
Oh, okay.
Delaware is really flat. Not a lot of trees, so the wind kind of just whips right through here.
Okay.
And we always have a lot of high tide warnings all over the place. We're practically an island, Delaware.
Oh, my.
So it's fun. It's quieter than Connecticut.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot quieter, and people are more friendly. Everyone has to talk to you constantly. I was thinking after I stopped talking previously that you guys should think about trying to bring the NRHS out back in your area. I know since, I guess it was the first one was Portland, probably. My first convention out there, and I've been out there, for that in Tacoma. And of course, I with Rail Camp West out there from 2015 through 18 or 19. Always been one of my favorite locations. And you could work with the new convention committee and come up with some good stuff. We'd be happy to come back out your way.
You know, what a segue to Trent Stetz. Trent,
Uh,
the Portland chapter of the NRHS. Take it away. You could
oh my gosh, I can still remember 2005 and 2011 conventions out here. I'm still tired from those.
Of course.
God, that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years
But
ago.
yes, one of these days we'd love to have a group come out again. But
Yeah. Okay. So quickly though, before I let you go, Trent, what's the weather like in the Rose City?
50 and rainy,
Okay.
overcast.
And Joel McCurry in Cary, North Carolina. Joel, if you're still there, what's the weather like?
It was about 75 degrees today, sunny, and leaves were falling at the rate of about 1 foot per hour.
And Steve Howes in the Tri-Cities. What's it like there today, sir?
38 degrees and overcast. It's finally starting to look like winter, although I did harvest the last of my tomatoes day before yesterday,
Oh,
and
wow.
also peppers.
Okay. And Dave Sprau in Warren, Oregon. What's it like there today, sir?
St. Helens, Oregon, it's raining lightly and 41 degrees.
Okay. And Alan Miller in Darrington, Washington. What's it like there, sir?
It's 43 degrees and cloudy.
All right.
As
And
we used to report the weather as telegraphers at places like Easton, cloudy, calm, 38 degrees, no new snow.
there you go. That's right. I do remember those things. So, well, thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for just a really great season. And I'm going to wrap up our program. Jack, happy Thanksgiving to you, and thanks to Mary for all of her help getting you online. It's just such an honor and a pleasure to have you on our show, Jack, and the audience, and it's great to spend time with you. Good seeing you. And to all my favorite turkeys that have survived this far, happy Thanksgiving to you all, and blessings to you. And let's just have
Bon
a great
appetit.
year. Bon appetit. And
Bon appetit.
watch our channel. We'll be dropping a few more videos as the holiday season. And then January 7th, we come back with some really great program. Tony, if you want to be on our list for future programs, just drop me an email in the chat and I'll add you to our mailing list for a future program. So on that note, I am going to thank George and Dave Sprau, especially Alan Miller, my buddies, and all of you, frankly, are my friends. And so thanks for a wonderful program. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say thanks everybody for being here. Happy Thanksgiving. And this ends the recording.